I suppose in my own journey, I would have been, even though I'd be seen as a risk taker, I didn't take as much risk as people take today. Fear of failure was always sitting on my shoulder, and that there was a mortgage to be paid, a livelihood to be earned. You could risk a certain amount, but you couldn't be reckless, or you couldn't go all in. I never wanted to, and that's the way I operated. So it was, you gamble a little bit, but you would never gamble an awful lot. You had to make a living at the end of the day. And, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and times were not that good. And if I was to be reckless with my education, with being a young engineer, the whole of society would have frowned upon that. So I took some risk, but not as much risk as people maybe can afford to take today. So there was no fallback position for me. There was no house I could go, or room I could rent, or I could just, you know, go back and live with my parents, or that wasn't an option. When I left the nest, I left the nest, and it was, you need to make your way now on your own. I think there's more security in being entrepreneurial now, I think, which is a great thing. And there's less stigma around failure.
Yeah, I think we look at failure now, we put it on a pedestal, and we say fail, and some people forget that you actually need to succeed at some point.
Yeah.
And we see that with a lot of entrepreneurs. They just figure it out, but nothing really happens. And so I think that the fountain of youth, right, is that I meet people, and sometimes they give me that boost of energy. I'm not sure it solves the fear factor anymore. You know what I mean? We get to a point where, like, yeah, I'll skip that. Too risky. But in terms of enthusiasm, what do you think? Is it contagious?
The enthusiasm is, I suppose, if I go back to my own time again, ignorance is bliss sometimes. So there weren't as many touch points, you know, there weren't as many stories of failure either. Now there's stories of failure everywhere, and they're so instant. You know, I mean, if you fail, somebody's writing about you an hour later. When I failed, when you know, in my early years, nobody would know about it unless I told them.
Give me one good story about that.
Okay, so as a young manager in my early 20s, I got promoted to be a plant manager at 26, and I got a new company car, a lovely red Toyota Corolla with spoilers and the whole lot on it. I had it 6 weeks and I was demoted. But I had moved to Dublin at that stage to further my career. Now, I never told anybody, and nobody ever knew. So I was allowed to lick my wounds, learn my lesson in private, and not repeat my mistakes.